wait, do your research, and again, really ask yourself, what kind of collector am I?
Welcome to Decentralized On, where lifelong friends Chicago and Disco navigate the ever-evolving crypto landscape. With genuine curiosity and a commitment to nuance as our North Star, we offer clear-eyed exploration. Our goal? To empower listeners with the tools and insights needed to flourish in this decentralized age.
Hey all, we've got an exciting show for you today. Show number 3. I am excited. I am Chicago, and to my left here
Hello,
is
everybody.
Disco.
Hello, everybody. I'm Disco, and I'm pleased as punch to be here for this third episode.
So in this episode, we're going to do something interesting. What we thought it would be and what it is going to turn into have changed. But before I get into that, one of the most fun parts about what we do, Disco and I, childhood friends, is talk about a piece of music, art, or a book or something that kind of inspired us and gives us the nuanced, decentralized lens that is so important to us as we navigate our lives and our families and our friends and all that stuff. So Disco has kindly set up a playlist on Spotify called Decentralpod, I believe.
Yeah, Decentralpod. And thus far, it's just any of the music or songs that we've mentioned or albums, we're going to try to, incorporate that into an ongoing, ever-growing a playlist so that if anyone wants to tap into the vibes, they can visit that and see what's been added and kind of take a little journey with us.
Yeah, episode 2 was all about music. So we talked about, a lot of different songs and inspirations there, as we talked about music from sheet music all the way to the blockchain and how it's changing and how some things haven't changed. So definitely check that out. But because of the new mix that Disco added, I'm definitely going to have a song this week because I want to get it on the playlist so I can listen to the playlist with the song that I really want on it. So one song that
we're front loading the show in hopes of padding the playlist with favorites. Okay, I'm
definitely padding.
Yes, indeed.
Well, the funny thing is, I already have resisted. Like, Disco, can I get the password to that? Like, I looked at your list and I already want to reshuffle the songs. And, some of the songs we put on there, we talked about albums and, he picked a couple songs from the album. And of course, my first response is like, in my head is like, that's not the song I would have picked. So, yeah. But the funny thing is when I listened the other night, I was walking the dog and I listened to the mix and, I'm like, Disco, I can pick songs better, Disco, because I know what I like. And of course, the songs you picked, I'm like, fine, it was perfect. So
it's all about getting into the flow and the tempo. And, we have to take the personal affiliations, if you will, aside and be kind of, beholden to the beats and how things work and play together. So I definitely felt a little tinge of anxiety whilst, selecting 2 tracks per album. And I could probably, this might be something I could do, but I could probably go back and do the playlist based on the same artists and do it as you would have. Like, I think I could probably have picked the jams that you would have advocated for.
Well, and for those of the people who haven't listened to episode 1 and 2, Disco and I did grow up together, and a lot of my musical influences came from him, and we have very similar tastes in music, I would say, but there are also definite divergences. In the last episode, I admitted that 98% of my musical tastes revolve around the beat and the harmony and the sound and not the lyrics. 2% goes to the lyrics. As I'm getting older, that's changing. And I don't think I ever asked what the percentage you would attribute, if you could possibly put a percentage to each.
Well, I think you have to look at the genres as well. So does that mean that you just have no interest in the lyrical side of hip hop and it's just the beats? Or if you're listening to hip hop, that's pretty central to the, essence of the message is the wording. So
I feel a trap being set up here.
I feel
tread carefully.
So I'm a little more genre based on that. So like progressive house, things like that, like, you're going to get a little vocal sample that kind of fits the formula and the equation and the algorithm, if you kind of want to look at it from, that bare bones perspective. But lyrics often paint the picture to a degree that I can't see just instrumental having a significantly bigger influence. So I look at it like, I'm really into, like, I love to read, I love to write and everything. So I put a higher quotient. I don't even know if that makes any sense, but
I think that's close enough.
I put a higher regard towards the lyrical side of it. So for me, yes, I love the beat, I love the groove, but I'd probably be, 60-40. Like, I want to hear what the song has to say.
Okay. And I would say 98.2 was my historical. It is definitely more lyrics now. And honestly, part of it, I think, as I've gotten older, back in our day, there wasn't really an ADD diagnosis or ADHD or whatever. I'm sure I was somewhere in that thing because I couldn't sit still. And I literally went through grade school, middle school, high school, tapping my leg under the table. And to this day, it drives my significant other absolutely bonkers. So I think now I finally can listen and appreciate the words more. So I don't know if I'm 60-40, but I'm definitely better than I was before. So it's an interesting thought exercise.
And not to go, too deep down memory lane and, look at, Chicago disco, but another thing we share that
we're friends.
Hey, we know each other. But one thing that may also be of interest is the fact that we both are left-handed, and we grew up essentially when we were growing up, it was not really understood. So when you were talking about the non-diagnosis of X, Y, or Z, it was a harder hill to climb being left-handed in, the times when we were growing up. Like, nobody understood it. We read things backwards. Like, it just didn't make as much sense.
I mix. So when I write 5-letter words that have consonants in the third and fifth letter, I think flavor is a 6-letter word, but we'll use favor. I'll write the last letter in the third and the third in the last. I'm sure some reading coach out there would be like, and I can guarantee that's because part of it, at least, I'm a lefty.
Yeah, I have the same thing. Like, I'll bumble words every time I do, like, handwriting. I'm always like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I'm literally putting the letters in the wrong place. But that's how it works.
So the track that I want to add this week is, like you said, now that we're in episode 3, I'm like, oh wait, I gotta front run and stuff the top of the top of the playlist. And maybe, who knows, as time goes on, maybe we'll replace and we'll push down instead of go just layering at the bottom, if you know what I mean. But mine this week is from a South African trumpeter and jazz musician and leader. Do you know who it is?
No.
Hugh Masekela. So there's a song that I absolutely love. And again, I wish we could play stuff, but then all royalties forever in perpetuity go to the big record label. Again, listen to our music episode. But the song is called Dezin Ora Biro, and it's awesome, and it's inspiring, and it's positive, and it's very kind of like basic, like human tribal emotions, and just good jazz. So that's my pick of the week.
Well, I'll be excited to peruse the updated playlist with the addition, and
I'd let it to go on record that I said mine before yours, so I will be paying attention to the order that it goes in.
Suffice it to say, and maybe this is an old school podcast tease, but I'm already churning an idea to add to the playlist for the next show. So I will not steal your thunder, and I am ready to end the show just so I can go check out that track right now. But we'll continue.
Oh, cool.
On. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate it. Do you have any inspiration or art or book or anything you want to mention this week before we go on?
I've been listening to DJ Cozy, and there's like this really kind of eclectic mixtape thing that he did with I think it was DJ Kicks, and there's a track on there, I can't remember the name of it, but it just melts me every time. Like it just gives me the feels, and I'll add it to the list, and we can put it in the notes what it is, but it just wrecks me. Like every time I hear it, once it hits a certain part. And I remember the first time I heard it, I was in a pool and it was like magic hour outside. And it was just like and you know what happens to me, which is really kind of weird. And I tend to get kind of down on myself when I come across just a brilliant piece of art. Like when somebody, you know, if I go to a crazy museum and see I'm just like, my gosh, people are really making the most of their time here. And it kind of hits me. I'm like, damn, I wish I could have pulled that off. You know, like what can I do? So
why was I in sales all those years? Yes. Nobody needs more copiers. Yeah, no, that's
100%.
That's a good point. I was, as you were telling the name, I was writing it down, and then I realized, wait, it's going to be in the playlist. So I guess kudos to us to creating something that we don't have to take notes anymore.
Yeah, Decentral Pod on Spotify, and again, we'll put the link out there so that anyone who's interested can. I think you just follow it, and then you'll get kind of the updates as we add to it.
Yep, for sure. So let's dive right in. I'm excited about this show, and I'm excited to share it with Disco. And again, it kind of changed. I would like to dedicate this show to all the to Brennan, Zeno, Brissy, and the whole Speakeasy crew led by Crown. And Crown, thanks for putting such a great group of collectors and builders together there. So let's dive right in. And Brendan, thank you for explaining how ordinals work. That was exceptionally helpful, and it allowed me to fill in the gaps of all the research.
So really quickly,
please.
I know that we're going to delve into, some explanation of ordinals, the ecosystem, the capacities and the potential and everything like that. But there's also another element that we're going to get into that kind of, you started kind of preparing and looking into this, and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe what I've kind of learned and discovered. And for me, like, I have no idea really where you're going with this. So I'm kind of edge of my seat, excited to kind of tag along and learn. So excuse a lot of interruptions and questions, but I'm going to try to follow and pick up some knowledge, because this is a totally new endeavor and space for me to examine.
Yeah, and I took a turn. This show originally was going to be, thanks Disco for bringing that up, it was going to be about ordinals and how nuanced and interesting they are, especially for those of us in the NFT space who kind of came over. I came into Bitcoin in 2015. I think it was early 15. I think I've said 14 and 15 on the show, but it was early 2015. I double checked it. And so Bitcoin was my first passion. I studied Andreas Antonopoulos, growing up in that era and just devouring everything I could. And it's amazing. I got in NFTs in 21. So I was kind of late to that game, even though I'd already been in crypto. But what I missed was, I thought I understood how blocks worked and all that with Bitcoin and then Ethereum. And, when I went to research this show, how ordinals work and how they're stored, and then going backwards into how NFTs are stored, I was just blown away at, again, like what 2015 and now, what is that? Again, I got to count on my fingers, but that's it. What, 8 years? 8 years. Yeah, 8 years. And I still can go down even deeper rabbit holes and figure out like, oh, that's how that works. So this one was fun. Again, it was going to be about ordinals. Now it's about storage of your art, your PFPs, and how secure are they and how permanent are they? And I think you're going to get a lot out of this. I've actually purposely kept a lot of this from Disco because I wanted him to look at it for the first time and with more wonder and not more with a bias coming in. And that's the beauty of this show and this relationship. I've been in crypto longer. Disco's been in it for just a couple of years, but he's learning quickly. But as he said, I forget more than he's learned already, but he also has the perspective that I can't have anymore. And that's how to see something again for the first time and kind of looking at it with a fresh lens, especially someone who's started and sold companies and has a good perspective of the greater business and certainly music landscape. So
yeah, I'm approaching this endeavor or this episode with a total beginner's mind, because if you really look, if the extent of my knowledge is, oh, there's my NFT. It's either on OpenSea or wherever, or I pulled it from there and put it on a cold wallet. And from everything I've kind of been told or fed, like, it's mine. There's nothing that could ever change. It's immutable. It's non-fungible. Da 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 da. So buckle up. I'm ready to learn.
Yeah, yeah. So where does your NFT live? So thanks to Midjourney, we've got a AI representation of what the Ethereum blockchain would look like. I thought of the 4 options I got from them on my first try. They did a pretty good job here. So consider anything on the little pedestal there and the cool lattice looking crystalline structures, that's on chain. Okay. So if we look at just on chain, that's where Ethereum is. Okay. So the first thing we look at, and like Disco said, what do we assume? We assume, people have different varying understanding of where their NFTs are stored. I think a lot of developers are going to look at this and be like, dude, I knew that. But I think a lot of collectors, I think are going to be pretty surprised. I'm going to go deep down the rabbit hole, but I'm going to make it accessible. There will probably be another show on ordinals because it's so insanely nuanced that I wasn't doing it justice the more research I did, because there's so many pieces to it, even on the Ethereum side. So I'm going to give everyone a good mid jump down the rabbit hole, but keep it top line. So for those devs who are like, dude, that's just basic stuff, I hear you.
Yeah. And I'm obviously coming from a non-dev perspective, so I'm already slightly intimidated, but I'll keep along the journey and we'll figure this thing out together.
Yeah. And you shouldn't be at all. So first we'll start with the obvious. What's on Ethereum's chain? And we're just looking at NFTs today, but this can be applied to a lot of stuff. So you've got the smart contracts, which is, where it all begins on chain, right? What you're looking at here, and what got a little cameo sneak peek before I got to it verbally, is the on-chain monkeys. So on-chain monkeys, most of what is on Ethereum on-chain are very small files. Generally, they're like 256-bit or SVGs. I believe monkeys are SVGs, but they're all entirely on-chain. So who else is on chain? Nouns are on chain. A lot of people on the Twitter X timeline have seen there's been a lot of talk of nouns, and there was kind of a revolution or a split in the DAO where just over half the people wanted to fork and really kind of get their money back because they didn't like the direction of the DAO. But nouns are really cool. It's 1 noun a day. Infinity, at least for now it is, right? And nouns are really on, and that is all compiled on chain. Nice Web 2 term, genius.
So essentially on chain is the goal, like that's the purest play, so to speak.
Yeah. So on chain is the most, if you think about it backwards, like from a collector standpoint, the least amount of variables that are involved with storing something, the better. So with on-chain art or PFPs or whatever you have, it lives there. So your one point of failure is you're betting on the Ethereum chain ecosystem itself to thrive and survive. If Ethereum survives, these will all always be there.
So as long as Ethereum's rolling, the blockchain's conducting its business, you have 100% security in terms of knowing where your artifact or NFT is.
Yes, these are locked on chain. Well put. So here's one called Loot. This one was actually kind of interesting. They, instead of having a PFP or a picture, they just put text in. It's almost like you got your loot bag and then you, the holder, were the story creator. So I thought it was an interesting concept, but obviously just with simple text. Think about it, it's like Dungeons and Dragons where all the modules haven't been written. I guess I'm dating myself and being super nerd because Dungeons and Dragons started in Wisconsin, by a guy by the name of Gary Gygax. So that's a
What
little.
what year did that happen?
Gosh, it's probably before my time. I want to say early 70s would
Oh
be my
wow. Okay.
guess. Yeah, D&D has been around a long time, and they're still a thriving group. There's people. There was a kid in one of my classes at the university, and he still travels around and does Dungeons and Dragons tournaments all the time. So it's actually, I don't know how big the ecosystem is, but there is a hardcore group of people still doing that. So
Yeah.
Loot is kind of an homage to that.
So essentially with Loot, they're basically providing you with the traits.
Yeah, they're providing
Yeah.
the traits like leather armor,
Yeah.
tome, studded leather belt, and then their thing is like get together and you all can create a story or PFPs or characters around that. So it's leaving it like, hey, here's 8 words or what have you, and it's get together, you know, with Discord or whatever, and let's create this whole, you know, universe together.
That's such a cool notion for, you know, you talk about empowering a community and, you know, having things organically come of it. Like that's at the basis of this, you know, like that's at the core of this. So that's kind of an interesting way to do it for sure.
Yeah. And storytelling from a PFP and NFT perspective is actually going to be a reoccurring theme here. So stay tuned for that, but that's
Sure.
a good kind of foreshadow, if you will. Now, interestingly,
Who's that guy?
CryptoPunks, yeah, CryptoPunks were not on chain originally. Remember, CryptoPunks were actually made in 2017 before the whole advent of the ERC 721 token format where you could have these non-fungible tokens. These guys were, you know, with CryptoKitties and a couple others, were the forerunners of everything that was going on here. So they had to literally figure it out themselves, being, you know, stud Solidity developers. And thank goodness at the time, many prominent punk holders gave Larva Labs a nudge to get them on chain forever. So in 2021, CryptoPunks officially became on chain. In the early days, it was just a reference. There was a huge sheet with all 10,000 CryptoPunks, and your on chain, we'll call it a pointer or reference, pointed to a certain part of the sheet. So you could then literally count, I believe, and validate which CryptoPunk you owned. That's how it started. Wow. There were some errors with the contract, and there's actually this whole originals versus V1. We're not getting into that today, but in 2021, CryptoPunks then officially went on chain, which obviously from a collector standpoint and a historical standpoint, you know, as we go decades into the future, I think will be a genius move.
So essentially they were so OG that it was before there was any concept of it becoming something, and then the ERC blah blah blah
721 yeah
was created specifically to be like, hey, there's something going on here, now let's enable it, you know, and kind of open it up.
Yep, with non-fungible tokens. Yep. So you could actually discern between, because remember on Ethereum there's Ethereum itself, right? And then there's ERC20 tokens, and there's I don't even know how many. There's tens or hundreds of thousands created out there because it's so easy to do now. Those ERC20 tokens are fungible. So until ERC 721 was written, that's what made NFTs possible.
Okay. So essentially that first wave with CryptoPunks and that was it was like an NFT pre-NFT in a weird way, right? Like it almost was a precursor to it and everyone caught up.
Yeah. I assume back then it probably hadn't gotten that silly term coined.
Yeah.
You know, and I think most people put palm on forehead when they hear NFT because it's probably the worst branding name of all time because it's not accessible, and it's It's the one that's stuck though, and over time people have tried to change it, but it's the one that's stuck. So
It got to the point that it was accessible enough that, like, I remember Paris Hilton was trying to explain it to like Jimmy Fallon or something. I was like, and if she's trying to explain it and however it came across, I still left totally confused as to what the heck the name meant and why that was chosen for such a cool, kind of movement forward with technology.
yeah, I mean, non-fungible in a token, just the non-fungible part just means you can have different distinct characteristics on different tokens within a collection or smart contract, if you will.
Got it.
So yeah, it's pretty fascinating. The other one I didn't mention there that kind of snuck in while we were talking was autoglyphs. So those are also on chain, and I think the base price or the floor price for autoglyphs right now is, I think it's like 85 ETH. So those are kind of true OG for collectors.
Wow. Okay.
So now let's take a look at let's go off chain now. So remember, obviously these aren't all off chain, but a big portion of them are. So we've got, you'll recognize some of these. We've got Bored Apes, are off chain. We're calling this off chain decentralized. We've got Azuki, and we've got MFers. So most of the good or recognizable or collections with a good smart development team underneath fall under this category, because remember, with Bored Apes or MFers or any of the ones you see there, they're too big to store directly on chain. So they have to be, the contract has to be on chain, and it has to reference out to these images and the metadata.
And too big, is that due to the intricacies of the art, like the quality of the art, the kind of the elements that are included that make it a larger file? Is that the net of
it? Exactly. The net is the Ethereum, the actual blockchain cannot hold, it can't store a ton of data in the transactions. So the smart contract then points or refers, and we'll get more into how it's done. But yes, like, again, that's why we joke, my overpriced JPEGs or PNGs or whatever, most of the images are one of the two of those. The small on-chain stuff generally either are SVGs or compiled SVGs, which are very able to compress quite a bit. And generally, they're very small files, but they can be, I may botch this, but think about it as like a vector file where they're very small files, but as you expand them and make them bigger, they don't get super pixelated. They can actually retain some of that,
some of the integrity.
Yeah, like CryptoPunks did. Nouns are slightly different. I believe those are 256-bit, and those are actually compiled on chain. So they're, how those are made and how it's done daily, and people vote on it. It's very cool and very interesting. Not financial advice at all, but Nouns is going through kind of its first big, I'm a big foundation book sci-fi guy, so I think I even said it in the last episode, but they're having their first Selden crisis, right? So there's a lot of talk, and people didn't like the direction things are going, like I mentioned before. So a lot of people forked, got their money back, but also gave the Nouns back to the treasury, so that to the original, the pre-fork, if you will. And then now, so those people, the people who stuck with it, kept the Nouns, now have this huge treasury of Nouns, but they lost half the treasury or more, whatever. I think it was 56% bailed. So it was a big number. This could be a good time to get in on a very interesting project that I think will stand the time as we march on decades in history. That's my personal opinion.
Not financial advice, but it's an opinion with which I find interest for sure. And it's interesting that they kind of had that split, and it could be a pivotal time, but those sort of things are potentially oftentimes opportunities. So thank you for that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we're building right now in a bear
Yeah.
market, and I love the last. This is my third bear, and everybody. It's been so funny this whole year. Everybody, especially the influencers and the big media personalities, are always calling bottoms, and when people are still calling bottoms, the bottom's not in. When 90% of the people are gone or just despondent on their couches and have to figure out reasons to get out of bed in the morning if they're super heavily into crypto, that's when no one's talking about it. There's your bottom. And I don't know if we're there yet. I don't know.
I hope we are, like, as one who's only really lived through in the cave of a bear. Like, I'd love to see the other side of the fence at one point, but I'm interested in this for the long haul. And, even this is just, it's a education that I love learning more about everything in this space. So keep going. This is just fascinating to kind of take a look at and understand more.
Oh, cool. Cool. So the third bucket we're going to look at is off-chain centralized. And again, I'm going to get all more into this as we go a couple slides in. But what off-chain centralized means is a lot of times the image and the metadata are literally stored on your website, and they're being stored often just like Web 2 stuff and Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud, Azure, what have you. So,
wow. So you're basically, these are kind of at the mercy of whatever's going on with these huge, basically cloud storage services, right? Like, if
yep.
that goes down, okay, keep going.
Yeah, yeah. So, is AWS going to go down? They run pretty good, and Google, yeah, we trust them too. So it's just different. So I put this one in for a reason. Nuclear Nerds was my first mint, and they recently did a drop, and like all, I feel like everyone did a drop this summer, and they added 20, or they even tried to add 30,000. They were adding a huge collection, and the market just tanked. But so they are totally off chain and centralized. That means the metadata, and the metadata just means the traits. So of this PFP on your left, the traits, it probably says like rabbit ears and peace sign, and that is the description of the image. The metadata also points to where the image file is located. All of these, I believe, are on Amazon Web Services. So I want to point out one pro here as to why I'm not here to tell people where to focus their time, just to educate. Again, it's with a nuance. What you can do when you're more centralized is, if you see the PFP at the edge of the left screen there, she started out that way when they first launched, but she had a special, they called it a mystery trait. One day, if you owned one of these, you just looked and your PFP changed into the file in the middle, which, that generates excitement and story. And that was super cool. And I believe it was even had a little animation. So those little glowy glows in the, coming out of the cocoon were actually moving. So, there was a lot of buzz and excitement as we were just getting started with the story there. And then I think it was about a month later, the team revealed that the character, which fits into the storyline, had butterfly wings. I believe this was the caterpillar mystery trait. But anyway, my point is with all of this, that by being centralized, you can change the metadata and change where you point the image, or in this case, if your image is actually stored centrally, you literally don't have to change the metadata to point anywhere, because you can just change the image. So
Whoa.
I'm trying to, yeah.
Whoa. So it can change. Whoever's behind it with access to this can change your image at any time. Correct?
Yep.
Like, wow. I know, like, one of the first things that I got involved with from an NFT perspective, the David Bowie family did a partnership with a handful of artists to, release a series of NFTs. And one of the ones I picked up and scooped up that I love is from Young and Sick. Shout out to Young and Sick on that. And what appealed to me was that it was continually going to be updated. And it is kind of cool. Like, be like, oh, they added like another frame, or they added this or that or the other. But I don't know how that sits, with the whole promise of, owning a quote non-fungible token, and it's supposed to be in there that somebody could essentially be like, hey, I'm going to take the wings off of this one and it's done. And wasn't there some, I don't know if we're going to get into this later, but wasn't there something that we talked about in our first episode with azuki, where with the elementals, there was a potential to change something going on there, yet here, that's still off-chain decentralized. So maybe there's something we could get into on the differences there.
Yeah, actually, that's a really smart question. And I think I'm going to wait 5 minutes to address that, because that's a super important distinction. Yeah, how could Azuki consider changing their background when we just discussed that they're off-chain and decentralized? Doesn't that mean immutable? Well, yes
Stay
and
tuned.
no, not necessarily. Yeah. So who else does it? Well, Mutant Apes is interesting. Yeah. So Mutant Apes is actually a 50-50, but I put it over in this camp. So the metadata is decentralized. It is on Yuga's website. So, probably hosted by whoever their host is, AWS or Google. But the image is decentralized. So the image is like its Bored Ape counterpart and MFers and Azuki and all the other big ones, Nakamigos, you name it, which is interesting. But if you think about it too, so when there are serums with yugalabs. So again, this is, it's not good, it's not bad, it's just interesting, and it makes you think why. So Yuga probably did it because at some point in the earlier days, you could get serums. And I believe, I'm not a big Bored Ape holder, but you could get an M1, M2, or M3 serum for Mutant Apes. I think most Mutant Apes are M1s, but then there was an M2 and M3 serum.
So hold on, I got to catch up. What are you referencing? What's a serum? Like where, like I have my image of what it is, but what is it in this context?
Think about it as I believe it was like a big barrel of radioactive stuff that was coming out. So it was this cool image that they had. So what you could do is you had this separate, we'll call it a PFP, NFT. You took the serum and then you ingested it from your mutant ape. And if you had an M3 serum, I know back in the day, those things, I don't even know if there's any left because there was very few of them. Those things were going for 60, 80, 100. I think the M3s might have been several hundred ETH, if not more. But the M3 mutant apes, basically the artists go then and take that mutant and they draw just an amazing, like one of the coolest M3 mutants, and I'll try and find it, but it's almost like I believe it's even called Trippy Ape, but it's the craziest ape you've ever seen. It gets away from kind of the gross oozy brains and stuff, and it's like this spiral. It's just beautiful. So maybe before we publish this, I'll just slap the image up there so everyone can see it, because it's beautiful. Okay. So because their metadata is centralized, they can point to a new image, which is maybe while it's being worked on, hey, it's the excitement. I mean, think about all the buzz in the community you can create from that. Like, hey, somebody just spent 180 ETH or whatever on an M3 serum and their mutant is now transforming. And when that new picture comes out, think about the press it gets, not only within the Bored and Mutant Ape community and the Yuga community in general, but really the whole NFT culture. Yeah. So it's super cool. And so there's reasons why.
I mean, it has the functionality to evolve and essentially you do have the functionality to kind of upgrade and, do that. So yeah, I understand that side of it, but it just seems like it is very, very different than the promise of the on-chain, so it's an interesting way to see it.
And I think it asks you as the collector and the person who went into this, and especially, when all our brains for the past year and a half, up until maybe February, our brains were hijacked. Like a new drop was coming. You saw everything on Twitter and you just the FOMO in you came in. Hopefully this educates more people, be like, where's this thing stored, and maybe who is the team, just asking fundamental questions. Cause I think if you understand that, it also allows you to ask yourself kind of the metaphorical question, or the self-reflective question. What kind of a collector am I, and what do I want to get out of this? Is it purely entertainment and evolution of my PFP, where maybe it will change over time if I drink this new serum? I mean, Azuki, remember, have the green beans that, I think Chiru's hand was kind of forced on that one to reveal that this green bean existed after the elementals drop, but they're being mum about it now. But, obviously now that we know about it, they probably have shortened the time that drip has to turn into a full glass of water. So we'll see. It's very interesting. And the last one, go ahead, please.
I find value in this, in kind of what you're saying, in kind of being able to understand more about what you're investing in, and kind of set up your own parameters of what's of value. And, maybe you don't care that it's, not set, or that it is centralized, or you want it, or it's somewhere in the middle, but it's just something that I've never had any concept of, to be frank. Like, I just took it, they were all on chain, and everything, it's there, it's never going to change. And it's an interesting exploration to kind of dig in and see that there's more to the story, and more than kind of what meets the eye. So thank you for walking us through this.
Yeah. And it's interesting. You use the term investing, and it's funny. It reminds me, like, think of all the people on the Twitter timeline over the years who are just like, you fools, like, you think you're investing. I suspect some of them, or most of them, who are saying that and screaming from the mountaintops, have probably gone down this rabbit hole and be like, why are you FOMOing into everything? Because I can only speak for myself at this point, and we'll get more into it in kind of discussion later. But the more you get into this, obviously the more you learn, and the more you learn, the more, at least I am becoming more of a collector and appreciator of being on chain. Because for me, I guess, at some point, you and I, we've joked about it, but we're a little older. We definitely bring up the median age just from ourselves by 9 years. We definitely are older than most of the people in this space, and then some. So, but, so we have families, and our thoughts are also, at this stage in life, more to the future. So it really makes me think, like, I have faith that Ethereum and Bitcoin and maybe Solana, there'll be a bunch of chains around serving different purposes. But when I invest, quote unquote, whether I'm a total knucklehead or not, like the rest of us listening to this who are into this, can I pass this to the next generation? It might go to zero, but my analysis is kind of saying, like, the more closer to on chain and the less variables you have, the greater chance that it's just going to be there, so protect your keys and everything, and the more valuable it will be.
Yeah, I think it's a good point, because, and I probably shouldn't have said investing, because I have, over the years, collected things that resonate with me. And I think that looking at this, as art, I buy physical art quite a bit, and, I don't do it. I never check the price of that. You know what I mean? I'm never like, ooh, what's that da-da-da worth? It's right. Dude, I like to walk by it and experience it in my house, and it brightens my day, so you get different return on your collection as opposed to your return on investment, I would say.
Right. And remember, with the advent of the blockchain, I mean, this show is about decentralization, and think of all the artists who, they might have had people at first, especially in the earlier days, help them get on chain. And, there's probably some middlemen who were less scrupulous than others, but think about all the artists who have made not only a lot of money, but made even a living. I mean, you, in your last show, you said about musicians, blockchain could create a middle class again and get rid of the middlemen and women who are taking such a large toll in these collections. So with artists, it's the same thing. Sure, OpenSea takes 2.5%. I don't know what the more artist-friendly ones like Manifold and those take, but they're a small cut. But I think those numbers are extremely fair for having a system. And it's certainly not the big auction house, Sotheby's, Christie's. I don't know what they're taking. I'm no expert in that, but it's with all your agents and, artists, and you got to get discovered. Like now you can get discovered, now the game has changed big time and we're in a huge bear, but the art is one of the first things that has been partially and better democratized through decentralization and Ethereum and Bitcoin.
Yeah. Just to dovetail, it's the same thing. You hit on it perfectly. If you're and you were, challenging me, so to speak, like, okay, we're starting XYZ band. Are we going to go straight on chain, or what's our strategy going to be? Same thing. We're going to be an art collective, whatever we're going to call it. I guess we'll have to start with Chicago in the title, but how would we go about launching that career? You know what I mean? And again, everything's kind of leading to on-chain and the decentralization. So that's just part of the overall movement and kind of the ethos out there. So it's nice.
Yeah. It gets rid of the middle person. I mean, that's to me the net of what decentralization is. The blockchains, they work, they're immutable. They don't care if what the politicians say, they keep marching on. So as long as there's a Bitcoin miner out there and as long as there's ETH stakers, the network will be secure and they will march on, allowing for more of an egalitarian group of people to plug into that without having so many toll takers in the middle. That's
absolutely
really good point. So the final one here is degods. So degods is entirely centralized. The metadata and the image are on the website. Interestingly, though, I don't know a ton about degods. I've never personally been a collector, but again, each PFP, and we can get into that now. I'm actually going to take a little journey to the website. Renga's another one that did. I love the Renga art, but again, like, is there going to be future change or utility there? I don't know. So we're going to look at kind of how this works before we go on our kind of journey to see how we could do this ourselves. So again, on chain, we got the smart contract, right? So the smart contract then for the decentralized ones, remember Bored Ape, Azuki, the smart contract on chain points to generally Pinata or Infura. Both of those are companies. And what they do is so Chiru Labs, who owns Azuki, I'll use them as an example because our first show was all about Azuki and what's going on with them right now. Chiru will pay Pinata to pin their collection. So you pay to pin. These bigger collections are probably paying, my guess would be a $1,000 or a couple $1,000 a month to pin. So what does that mean?
I don't know.
On Pinata or Infura, you're pinning your images. IPFS is the storage. So
what does it stand for, IPFS?
Interplanetary file system. So this isn't a perfect analogy. Purists will probably get mad at me, but think of it as the HTTP, where it's basically pointing. It's saying, hey, smart contract is telling me the image is over there, and that's where it is. So basically, IPFS is the pointer, and Filecoin is the incentive to store. So Filecoin is the actual decentralized storage and kind of all the gears that make this work. Interestingly, IPFS and Filecoin were made by the same person who then turned into a company. His name was, I've got it here, it's Juan Bennett, and that's Protocol Labs. So this was actually developed by a company. Now, don't worry if the company goes out of business. It's out there. It has been decentralized. Filecoin has its own Coin, I believe there's like 1.6 billion of these things. Filecoin was one of the original decentralized storage systems. So if you go back to music and the BitTorrent days, remember how we were basically all, well, not me, of course, but people were storing these music files on their computers, and it was redundant all over the place. And if you wanted to play a song, you were literally accessing it through this huge intermediary of networked, we'll call them nodes, but these songs were all over, literally on people's hard drives and their cloud drives if they wanted to set it up that way. But back then it was really their hard drives, and it would go through the internet. So think of it as total decentralized storage, with Filecoin, its own entire blockchain, as the incentive mechanism.
Okay.
So Filecoin has a price with it and everything. So, and that's how we get to the azuki, or the Bored Ape in this case, getting pinned. Okay. So do you have any questions before I go on? I can see the gears whirring.
I know. Well, I'm trying to see. So essentially, and of course, since we're talking about smart contracts, we're really referring to, anything that's based with Ethereum. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
We're sticking to Ethereum right now. I'm going to touch on one element of Solana that actually touches Ethereum too. But yeah, we're just focused on Ethereum right now.
Okay, so essentially the smart contract goes to the pin, goes to the protocol, and then Filecoin, is that like the library? Like that's where everything's really stored that then they're seeing? I'll show you in a sec.
The link you'll see is actually, it'll say IPFS on it, but Filecoin is the mechanism to actually store it. The IPFS, think of it as the address or pointer. So that's what you see, but know that Filecoin is the storage drawer where all this stuff is and can be referenced. And remember, people are incentivized to store and get Filecoins, I believe it's FIL, in return for storing these in redundance.
Okay, so they're almost like stakers or miners to a degree for that.
Correct. Okay. Yeah.
All right.
So
I'm with you.
They're storing information. That's a good question. So it gets more interesting, but first let's just take a look again. So off-chain centralized, we know, just to compare again how these are different. Basically those are stored on your cloud servers generally, and your web, the most Web 2 out of all of these. So let's take a look at Azuki 6501. This is the first one that I got, so I always use him as an example. And he's got the little Air Beans, which are like the Air Jordans I used to skate in. But again, the storage is on Filecoin, the protocol is IPFS, and it's pinned with Pinata. So I'm showing the actual image down here. You don't have to look at the whole image. It's a whole bunch of gobbledygook, but you can see kind of towards the end on the bottom line of those, this one big URL, it says ipfs.dweb. So that's what you're looking for when you're looking for these decentralized solutions. You're looking for that IPFS, and I'm actually going to show people how to do that. So one
really quick, just to make sure I'm tracking on this. So basically the collection is interfacing with Pinata or whatever that is to pay to pin. It's not individual collectors doing that, correct? So it's
yes.
Okay.
So here's where it gets interesting. If the company goes out of business, or is a rug, if they're a rug, they'll probably do it centralized and don't really care. But if they go out of business, at some point, you're going to stop paying Pinata to pin it. Now, this is where it gets interesting. That doesn't mean it's not there anymore, but that does mean that the Filecoin storage holders are not incentivized to hold it anymore. If they're not incentivized to hold it, they may, in cycling their own data to make sure that they're storing that which is pinned, especially as more and more stuff is put out in, IPFS and Filecoin, the more that are out there, the less chances over time that those might get archived or recycled. So those images could go away. So, I'm a big fan of Azuki and yugalabs. Again, we have a whole episode on it, but if they stop paying that bill, no more pin, and it could go away. So that's kind of a big deal.
That's a vulnerability.
Is it? So that's another question. So even though we said it's decentralized and they're using, one could argue, best practices, how permanent is that? You know, if they make a ton of money, and I'm not just picking on yugalabs, I'm picking on any of these founders who hold and have made these art collections that have done well, at some point they can move on, they can work for other companies, they can start other companies, and if they don't pay that bill, it could go away. So it's interesting. So yes, it's decentralized, but it's nuanced, right?
It's in the middle.
It's in the middle. And here's one more piece just to make you scratch your head even a hair more. Ooh, good time. It's like I'm a puppet master, like, and now he will scratch his head.
Yes, wizard.
Yeah. So yes, I am Oz. So this is interesting, and this is where we're going to take our little field trip, if you will, in the right contract. So you can look that the beauty of onchain, remember, in Ethereum and Bitcoin, is if you're willing to dig and not get scared by weird symbols and codes, you can find out exactly what's going on. So with azuki, remember I mentioned the green bean. So in the right contract, which I'm going to get to, I'm going to do an example. If you see set base URI in the right contract and you see this, and this is through OpenSea, then into Etherscan, you know that has been left open. The entire smart contract can be changed. Everything can be changed and repointed. Those images could be sent to a ghost animation of you being flipped the bird, which we talked about in one of our episodes that Goblins did because they wanted to try and lock in the commissions with a better smart contract. They literally one day had the finger pointing where your goofy goblin PFP was, and people were pissed. And I thought it was in hindsight, obviously they probably do too. It was a dumb move, but they could change that just because the set base URI was not frozen. So that's as deep down there's a whole 16 more layers. I'm not going to go deeper, so devs forgive me, but I want people to understand superficially what's going on. We can always get more into stuff later, but if it's not frozen, if you don't see this in the right contract, that could be good. It could mean it's gone, but there's, again, thank you, Brennan, in the speakeasy. Even if this isn't there or it's frozen, there's a couple other ways where they can actually change it or manipulate it with change ownership and stuff. But again, that's a deeper dive for possibly another day. Yeah, for sure.
Okay. I have a lunch. I'm ready to go on the field trip.
Are we going to go on the field trip now? Let's do it now. This is a good time to go. So I'm on OpenSea here. We all recognize OpenSea. So I'm on DeGod, and I'm not picking on DeGod specifically. I actually found it kind of interesting. Remember how I said DeGods was centralized? Well, there's this season 1, 2, and 3. So they've actually, your DeGod kind of evolves over time. So again,
see, that's cool.
Yeah, they're painting a story. So if you're into DeGods, like you have different looks in your PFP, and I don't know what their IP rights are compared to Chiru and some of the other ones I have studied, but is a PFP, you have options, and that's, I would call that utility. Yeah. Now, whether you see value in utility or not. So if you want to know more about your collection, you scroll down to your PFP and you go to details. So my mouse is hidden, but I went to details. And then remember this, it's token ID 522. So I'm going to click on the contract address here, and that's going to take me to Etherscan. I'm assuming if you're listening to this show and you haven't literally fallen asleep or said to your spouse, I know he's moving his mouth, but I don't know any of these words, then you've probably seen or been to Etherscan, right? So then we go to the little green check here. We go to contract. Okay. So this is the contract for DeGods. And I think somewhere it actually even says, here it is, token tracker DeGods. So it's labeled. So you got the code, you got the read contract, the write contract. Some of these will have this read as proxy, write as proxy. If you see that, And actually, they're doing some kind of cooler, newer stuff. That's where it is. The older collections, everything would be here in the read and write contract. But because we see proxy, we're going to go there. So we are going to go to read as proxy, and we're going to scroll down, and we're going to look for token URI. So there it is. Disco, do we remember the number that we want? It was 522.
It was 522. That was my charge, was to remember that. I'm glad I came around.
3 numbers, and you did it. And that was back in the day. I remember when our generation had to remember 7-digit phone numbers. To some of our best friends, even some kids who were acquaintances, sad to say, my memory banks still possess their 7-digit numbers. And I wish I could say it just to make you laugh, because I think you'd know who this was. Well, some of them you know who it was, but for now, I'll just say 8675309. All right, so I'm hitting query here, okay? So
really quick, just because I'm trying to track with this. So essentially, you can go to Etherscan and view the smart contract. Is that?
Yes.
And then you just have to kind of know what you're looking for. And in this case, we go down, we get into the token URI, and that's kind of the key to unlocking some of this information.
Yep, exactly. Okay. Exactly. So, and the beauty is you can pick your PFP. So what I just did is put in the token ID. We got 522. Here's the string it returns. This is where the metadata is. Okay. It's at metadata.degods.com. So right away, seeing that obviously Degods has their Web 2 website, this is where the metadata is being stored. And to save time, I believe I actually just grabbed it so we don't have to keep copying, pasting, and clicking. So here's all the metadata. This is what is contained in that PFP. And there's a lot of stuff here on traits. I suspect because they have 3 seasons of the guy morphing, I suspect that that's all in here. But one of the most important things in here, I'm going to highlight it here, is where is the image. And I don't know, is that highlighting? Oh, it's so small. So this is a PNG, and that tells you where it is. It says metadata.degods.com with the actual file name. So if I copy and paste that, there it is. So it's stored maybe AWS. I don't know. I didn't go deeper than that one, but it's stored locally, and that allows them to change it on the fly. So again, great way to tell a story, but you are at the mercy at the variables of not only Ethereum, so there's level 1, and then down to the centralization of where it's stored. That's another one. And the team, because at some point, especially some of these teams, I believe Frank and those guys are doxxed, or at least I know he is. So I think he's an honest guy, and he's going to stand by his community for sure. But some of these guys, they're not doxxed. Like, they can simply just walk away and, unpin and just be like, see ya, suckers. And obviously we've seen time and time again, there's no shortage of scammers here. Yeah. So it's pretty interesting to go down that rabbit hole. So one last point before we get back to it, where Mutant Apes is, the metadata was on Yuga's website, but the image was on IPFS. So it's kind of your hybrid. And again, I assume that's for the serums, but it's so they chose the path, probably because of the serums, of kind of half decentralization. Hey, let's make the image locked in on IPFS, but let's have way more flexibility behind the scenes from our own servers with metadata. So
and it's kind of hard, just going through this discussion, since it's still evolving and it's so new, it's kind of hard to say this is the best practice, like this is how it should go. I understand kind of the lean towards the purism of, well, on-chain should be kind of the grail on it, but I don't know. It makes you wonder a little bit, because some of the, you say utility or whatever it may be, some of that is what could be coming. So if you look at it from,
right,
I'm looking at it back from the episode we did a little bit ago on music, maybe you want it that way so that you can get more things added, or concert tickets come through that, or this or that. So it's interesting to kind of have this as a baseline, but I'm not really even sure who's doing it right, or if there is a right at this point.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. And just remember too, and thanks again, Brennan, for explaining this to me. You can at some point, so maybe Chiru Labs, after the Green Bean Azuki, whatever that does to the OG collection, you can go in and freeze this. And, with IPFS, because once you go in and freeze it, like at some point, I would like to know that my Bored Ape, I don't have one, but if I had a Bored Ape or my Azuki or my MFer, at some point, I don't want more utility. Lock that down. Freeze the base URI, and so they always have that choice to be able to go and lock down.
And I guess the thing that kind of sticks with you is the like Chiru or whoever, they have the power to do that. The holders don't have any power in this to alter anything. So you're, I guess, buyer beware to a degree. And it is probably a good piece of due diligence to explore. If you're going to, get into a collection, you have to kind of understand what you want out of it. And that, you don't have the ability as a holder to affect this.
Yeah, entirely 100%. And I guess that sums it up as like, know thy founder. And especially, I think those of us who are here in this bear and we're in the last bull market, and we remember getting our brains hijacked by these mints that, that morning we were just eating a quiet breakfast, and then all of a sudden we're like running to find our hardware wallet, like with our heads cut off, and our friends and family are like, what has gotten into that person? Hopefully this education for the next bull run, we can all be like, what is this? You know what? I can wait. Like, because remember, you could buy something 5 years from now when the dust settles and probably win there. Yeah, getting in early. Like, I got lucky. I got on the Moonbirds whitelist, and I'm not going to lie, I didn't hold it very long. I dumped that thing. Unfortunately, I didn't wait long enough. I should have waited a couple more days when it was in the 30s, which was, I baffled my mind, but I think I got out in the teens. But, know what you're getting into. So if there's a mint like that, if there's a big bull market again and you get a allow list, yeah, maybe go for it if the stakes are low, but otherwise wait, do your research. And again, really ask yourself, what kind of collector am I?
Yeah, that's great advice.
So before we cross to a new element, which will be ordinals, which was the thrust of this whole thing until I went down this rabbit hole as a prepper to get to that. There's another coin called Arweave. It's its own blockchain. If you're in the US, it's very hard to get your hands on because of SEC, and thank you very much, but it's tough to get your hands on. But Arweave is another, we'll call it a Filecoin competitor. A lot of Solana tokens have embraced Arweave, and what makes Arweave slightly different and kind of interesting is same thing. The Arweave miners, if you will, get paid in R tokens if you're storing the files on your computer or wherever you're storing them. It's called proof of action, actually. So instead of proof of work or proof of stake, proof of action, the network actually will test you, and the contract will test you to say, hey, are you holding this archived thing? And you show proof that you have that. So pretty cool, I would say, advancement from Filecoin probably, but what makes Arweave really interesting and why people are migrating there more on Solana, but now there's Ethereum collections that I've heard are getting on it. I actually couldn't find any, but I'm sure they're getting into it too. Is you pay as the owner of the collection, you pay once and it's stored forever. Interestingly, they put the payment that you make in an escrow, and then they pay the miners, if you will, over time to continually store, and obviously in redundance and all the nodes and all that, in perpetuity forever. So what's interesting about Arweave, it's a pay once model. So again, let's just say hypothetically, if Yugalabs in 10 years, they moved on, they do something else and, or whatever, something happened or some other thing, you don't have to worry about something getting unpinned with Arweave. It should be there. So your breakpoints are obviously the, you know, if we're talking Ethereum, the Ethereum chain, then
Right.
it's the Arweave and the tokenomics system, and can it be hacked, right? So it's you've got
Yeah.
two big variables there. So that's you're removing one variable of if it gets unpinned, they can just yank that sucker and you're out of luck.
Wow. Chicago, where do you come across? I've never heard of Arweave, and you have like intricate charts. Like it's mind blowing the levels of depth within when you just peel back this onion just slightly. Like I had no idea that Arweave was even a thing. And it's just interesting, just the sheer tonnage of things being built and innovation happening across the board. Like, wow.
Yeah, there's a lot of smart people out there. And Arweave, I had heard of it. I didn't deep dive on it before, but just listening to all the different shows and podcasts and just Twitter, you just come across things. But really coming into this research is when I realized the nuance between it and, Filecoin and IPFS and how they were different. So,
yeah,
I'm on this journey learning too. My baseline, I probably have just a little more of a baseline where it's like, oh yeah, wait, isn't there that thing? Or so I know maybe a little quicker just what corner to turn around and which corners are more like scam coiny or just Me Too stuff that's not really original.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you. As always, this program is designed for entertainment purposes only. This is not financial advice, and we encourage you to always do your own research before making any moves.
Yep. Take care all, and have a good one till the next show.
Until then.